going to be doing Build with Malla Haridat today, one of my amazing mentors that I've learned so much about. And we're going to talk about crushing your sales goal. And Maya will join on Instagram. So this is the behind the scenes. So welcome. We are going to be live streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So anyone joining, this will be posted later as well for Build with Joy podcast that will launch eventually when I feel like it. But live streams will be up. And Maya, if you could join in here. I think.
All right.
There we go. You go live. Let's see. And it should be going there. So we are everywhere. And
I love it. Oops, sorry, getting a little feedback.
Oh, it's fine. We're okay. There we go. And we will be on Instagram, but primarily we are on Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to find Joy Valerie on that and on my Twitter. So you can ask us questions, we'll be answering, but I wanna introduce you all to like this amazing powerhouse woman that I know, and I'm so lucky that has been part of like my business journey and gave me some tough love, but I'm definitely the part that I've needed. So if you want to introduce yourself, Maya, who are you? Tell me who Maya is.
My pleasure. My name is Malla Haridat. I'm a business coach and speaker, and my goal in life is to help entrepreneurs uncover what they don't know about running a successful business. And so where that passion always has lied for me is working with folks of color, because I think we are incredibly talented. We bring to the table all of these amazing skills, but in terms of how to do business in a way that fits who we are authentically, and also how do we make money in this capitalist society, sometimes those things tend to clash. And how do you find a way that you can present what you're offering and also make money while doing it? And so that's where I spend a lot of time, is in that space, working with people in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's really like why I was excited to take your class when and I think I found it through the Small Business Association, which I didn't even know offered all of these classes at libraries, so fund public libraries, right? And it was through the government, and that I was able to join. And I think that was like the approach that you took was what attracted me to working with you too, like beyond our class, because I was like, wait, like, that's something that I struggle with a lot, like being very much more, I guess, leaning towards a more socialist side, where I'm like, we need to, distribute as much as we can. That money tends to be like a difficult conversation, especially when we come from communities or are from immigrant communities where we're used to like the communal aspect of things. But we're living here, and this is like a capitalist society. So it's like, how do we start to adapt and learn the game, but also like so that we can, make sure that that money comes back into our communities, because, we're at 2020 and we're just like, how did we get here? And it's like, well, we've been disenfranchised for a long time, right?
1,000%, yes. And so, I mean, and to that point, it's funny you bring that up, because very often when I'm invited in to do workshops and trainings, right, there is this very specific curriculum that is given. And they're telling you, okay, you have to teach things like, here's how you build a sales plan, right? Like, here's how you run your financials and your numbers, and you count your expenses. But one of the big problems that often happens is that for a lot of us, we're coming to the table already with these cultural values that we don't even realize, because they're just part of who we are, that conflict a lot of times with what the typical, that's the way I'll say it, what the typical business advice is. And so then, because it doesn't feel comfortable and natural, right? And you feel kind of like, what the heck is going on right now? You don't grow your business the way that you need to. And I think we need to have spaces where we can take a step back, pull down the covers on this thing, figure out what's working for me. Like, how do I actually move my business forward so I can land the 5-figure contracts I know that are out there, but also working with clients that, are not going to now expect me day and night and day, right? To be able to now be like, to be at their bequests, because as a person of service, that's what I'm adjusted to, is every time you turn around, of course I'm going to give and I'm going to serve. So how do you find that balance? And I think there are definite ways of being able to do that. I see some love going in on the chat. So if that is something you can relate to, like, how do you make money, but also stay true to who you are and your values? I mean, definitely show some love in the chat on that one.
Yeah, and definitely like let us know what you're building, where you're at, tuning in from, and any questions that Maya could answer towards the end, like it'll be here. We'll have this go live. But I think that was definitely one of the biggest things, especially like one of the biggest problems I think is that like we undervalue ourselves, and it comes from this like humbleness, right? Like we are, and I know especially like in Guatemalan culture, it's very like taboo to talk about money. Like it's, we also are very like don't bite the hand that feeds you type of thing, right? We're very like loyal to our bosses, that it also is just like, wait, we end up like not demanding more because we don't see it from that lens as like, oh, they're profiting, so we deserve a piece of the profit. It's more just like, no, we're like loyal. Thank you for this. We're very like, thank you, very grateful. But at the same time, it's like, wait, but that's our labor, And I think that's something that it's very cultural that we need to like kind of work towards and through, right? Where it's like, okay, how do we build these new systems? And that this is conversation that we've had forever, that it's like, we need to build a new system, right? But one of the biggest things that you push people to do is to start realizing their value, right? So what and you're going to be launching your online course, right? So how did you end up getting into entrepreneurship? Because you don't just work with like small businesses, you literally team up with people from day one. Like when they're in high school, you're just like, listen. So how did you get into this?
Totally. So I had this really interesting thing happen that I was extremely fortunate about, where I was actually able to, and actually I apologize, this is like one of those moments where like your whole life comes together, because my daughter is actually asking me for something real quick. So I apologize. I'm just trying to like
go ahead. This is the reality of being a mom and a businesswoman.
This is I can't do it right now. Okay.
And working remotely.
Yeah, I'm trying to work remotely and juggle, so forgive me on that one. But here's what happened. When I was in high school, I had this really interesting series of events that happened where I was able to have a small amount of money due to a family member that had passed. And my mother asked me if I wanted to be able to purchase a used car or if I wanted to be able to do something else. And crazily enough, I decided that I wanted to be able to get a series of vending machines. Now, I will acknowledge, yes, vending machines, right? Like, I'm sure that's like every 17-year-old's dream, not. But it was a long story of how I figured out that I wanted to do that, because what I saw for myself was that when I got to college, I wanted to find a way to be able to make money, that I wasn't going to be spending 30 hours trying to earn a living to make money, and then also trying to keep up with everything in school. So what I will be forever grateful for to this day, I don't know why my mother, who was like very old school, Southern Black woman, raised very traditional middle class, like why she ever let me take that giant risk that she took. Actually, 1 second, I'm sorry. That she let me take that risk that she took. This is like one of these moments where like my whole world is colliding together.
No way.
Happened totally. She allowed me to take the risk, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And I think that's what's instilled in me this sense of working with young people now, of giving them that opportunity to take a risk at a young age. Because when you start taking risks, when you're not dealing with the mortgage, you're not dealing with the car payment, you're not dealing with the student loans, what tends to happen is then that becomes embedded in you. And so fast forward, here's what happens. I go to an Ivy League school, have my mind blown at what the possibilities are, because I'm a first-gen college student, right? And then I'm in this whole new structure that like where genuine wealth is actually at. And there's all these networks and systems and ways of doing business. I have no idea. But I had the one fortuitous moment of having taken a risk at a time when there was really no money on the line. Like the vending machine business, I crashed and burned. Like I messed the whole thing up. I'm not even gonna try to like own that I did it right. I did not. But what happened is things like sales became more natural to me. Things like marketing became more natural to me. And when I was in college and work study offices were offering me at that time, $5, $6, $7, $8 an hour to work, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like if I just get my machines up and running, I can make that same amount in like 2 hours that you're telling me I'm now required to work like 10 for. So why would I do that? And I think that seed and that sense of self-determination, which I'm so grateful I had at a young age and was able to have the confidence and courage to do that. Even when I wasn't making a ton of money, there's just that seed that's planted in you that tells you, well, it's going to be hard and you may not know how to do it, but why not figure this out on your own terms so that you have a business that you actually can create that's yours, that you look back on that is, the quick, fast forward to where we are right now. We all know now that I have a young daughter. We were able in our family to make the decision to homeschool not because I'm dealing with a 9-to-grind job, but because I've been able to apply these principles throughout my entire business career. And that to me is what this is all worth it for. It's being able to make these types of decisions where it ain't perfect. You're seeing it right now. It is not perfect, but we can grow, right? Isn't that what it's all about? Being able to grow?
Yeah, and you have complete ownership over your time and the lifestyle that you want to lead. And I think that's something that, when I took your class, I was like, I think I was just sitting there really quietly, and you were like going over software and stuff. And I was just like, oh, why don't you try doing this, and that, right? And you're just like, hold up, what's your background? And I remember like, I had just gone in and was just like, yeah, I'm just going to be freelancing, right? Like, I think I had joined a couple like startup, like people from like that were founding companies were like reaching out to me and being like, hey, join my team. And I'm like, I don't know, right? And then you're like, what did you do? And I was like, yeah, I like led operations for this like tech software company. Like, I just built out all these teams, but like now I'm just chilling and just trying to figure out like just do some freelance stuff. And you were like, hold up, like you can build like an entire agency. And I was like, yeah, I used to work at Rameen. And you like saw the future and you're like, this is all the things you can do. And I feel like sometimes it does take that outsider looking in to being like, wait, like you have this potential, right? And me just thinking like small beans, right? Like I was just like, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. Like,
well, hold up. I'm going to challenge you on it. And I want folks to type into the box on IG, I can relate, if they can relate to this, because I think a lot of people can relate to this. Not only are we thinking that way, but we are in an environment that is encouraging us to think that way. In the professional work world, of course you are encouraged to think that way, right? You're encouraged to think small because then that keeps your salary small.
Right.
Your workload high, and that keeps your salary small. And you don't ever think to ask the question, should I demand or should I ask for more? Right?
Right.
I mean, if you can relate to that, yes, I see a hand raise. Exactly. Like, I think that's seriously intentional. That to me is how systemic racism and sexism shows up, to be very frank. I think there are very, very, very subtle things, right? It's not this overt day-to-day thing that like, you can see it coming in the door, but they find ways to make you doubt yourself, doubt your value, doubt your worth. And so what winds up happening is after years of doing that, then when you go to launch a business, everyone is in this like, oh, I want to create a lifestyle business that's comfortable. And I'm like, yeah, but you have talents that are worth way more.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I was at. I was just like, I just want to like, just my own little comfy life and stuff. And now I'm like, I still want that. But I'm even realizing was like, wait, I need to hire people. And then I was like, okay, I can still build that and still have the lifestyle I want, right? Where I'm like not confined to an office. And I think now we're even seeing that more. Everyone's like, embrace the remote life. And I'm like, yes. But even then, you kind of touched on something that I definitely wanted to go deeper is the systemic racism and systemic oppression and the sexism that occurs in the workplace or even just in business, right? And we started talking about that a little bit earlier when it's like people expect free work or, men are pushing for that. And like, I think that's something that definitely like kind of hinders our own growth and even understanding our own value when it comes to pricing. And this is like something you're an expert at, like you're an expert salesperson. So what do you think, like, just like elaborate on that?
Yeah, totally. So this is the reason why I'm creating this 3-month course, basically a system on crushing your sales. This is the reason why I'm doing it, because I am sick and tired, to be frank, of going into the events and the workshops and seeing these incredibly talented people of color. And I'll shout it out. It's the women of color that speak to my soul, right? Like speak to my heart completely, where it's you have degrees, you've worked in environments that are, highly competitive and that demonstrate you bring value to the table. But because of the day-to-day types of things that we've encountered, it's wrecked with your psyche. It's wrecked with your ability to confidently say, I need X, Y, and Z money, and then to sit back and wait to see if you're going to be compensated on that or not. And I mean fairly. I'm not talking about like you're just saying you want $1 gazillion just cause, but because you bring that value to the table. And so I think what we need to do is create a space where people can have these conversations intelligently, stop having them siloed. Like I have an example. I'll share this example. A couple of years ago, I ran into a client And when you work in your business, you're always going to run across clients that are like, oh, just, out there, right? And you don't know it at first, right? It happens, right? I mean, that's probably a whole nother podcast episode, the craziest client you ever dealt with, right?
Lord.
Yeah, you see, that's a whole episode right there. We can have that totally. And so if you've had crazy clients, do me a favor, type in the chat crazy clients so that I know that I'm to the right people. I'm sure people have had crazy clients. So here's the deal of what happens. You deal with that crazy client, and the client that I was working with, to be very frank, there was a lot of racism that was going on. And ironically, we were working with another company, and that other company saw it, which is the irony of all ironies. The other company saw it. And only because, I feel that makes me feel better. Like, actually, when those moments happen, it makes me feel like this is real. And so what happened is, because that other company saw it and they called it out to me, what I was doing was creating this pattern of overworking. That's my pattern. That's how it shows up when I'm dealing with the isms. If someone tells me something very subtle, like I usually get it's not clear what you're trying to do, right? Or it's not precise or detailed the way we want it. And it actually is, but I'm being told these very fuzzy words that like, okay, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to prove to them that I got this, right? Because I was raised to be a hardworking Black woman, because what's the stereotype? You can't be seen as a lazy Black person in the work environment, right? Like, let's call it out. So of course I'm not going to be seen as that. But what happens now is you're overworking yourself because you're never going to achieve what it is that they're saying that they need, because they know you're not going to achieve it. It's racism, and they won't acknowledge that that's what it is that's going on. But it's subtle, and it plays into your psyche. And where I think the real damage is not at the moment when you're dealing with that client. It's when you go on to the next client. And that next client says, how much do you want for this contract? And you're thinking of the last one, and you're like, oh, well, I worked really hard, and I don't know if I really did really well on that. So I'll bump my prices down so they won't complain about me charging too much. Did I hit a nail there?
Oh man. Yes. Oh my goodness. I think that's definitely something a lot of us struggle with, right? And thinking that we're not good enough, and then feeling bad that we overcharge. But then at the same time, like, I know so many mediocre white men, and just men in general, just mediocre men that are mediocre people, to be honest, that are charging way more. And you're just like, hold up, what? Right? Like, and I think that's especially the people that are overachiever type, that are the ones that are going to like go above and beyond and be very like particular about their work, are the ones that tend to be, like charging less because they're like, well, I wasn't good enough. Right. And I think that's something that we need to get over, because also, our twice as hard is like some basic ass person's like 5 times as hard, right? Like
that's exactly it. That's what people have to walk away realizing, is that you have to work. I'm not in any way, shape, or form, to your point, I'm not saying be mediocre, but you have to work. But then at a certain point, you've got to step back and assess what is the value that you bring to the table.
Right.
And do it from a space with people around you. And so that's part of where I'm doing with this system, is like, we're going to create a community of people where you're going to have this conversation in a group. So it's not you thinking you're going crazy, because that's what they do, is they'll isolate us so that it's just you're the one Latina, you're the one Black woman, you're the one, whatever the case may be, in the office. And then you're going through these scenarios and you're literally thinking you're crazy, but you're not. And so I think when you come together with a group, we're intentional about these conversations, and then you do the work that you did. I mean, you did the work. You started asking those tougher questions, right? About, what is the actual value that I'm bringing to the table, and where am I not showing up in a way that I need to be showing up more powerfully? And let me own that for a minute. It's uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden, magically, when you start pitching your prices and your services on different sales calls, look at what happens, right?
Yeah. And I think, all of that. Just, I'm excited for what we're going to do. And definitely, like, these are conversations that just having them with you, I was like, okay, I have to be more confident. And it's funny enough, I was talking to someone else earlier, and we were saying how freelancing really gave us a lot of confidence to know like what not to deal with anymore, right? Versus like when you're working for someone else, you're usually just like, okay, I need to like protect the company, and like, the customer's always right, that you like take that abuse, right? But also you're not the one seeing the numbers come in, right? You're just getting your steady salary, not even realizing like you know, if you get 150K, that means the company's probably making like 7 times as much minimum, right? Like 7 times as much. So you're bringing so much value to the table. But also I think one of the things that I've always loved that you've always like, you kind of ingrained this as me is like teaming up with other people, right? Like focusing on what it is that you're good at, right? And that's even something I've had to step back and be like, okay, I'm good at data analysis. I'm good at like operations, right? Like business operations, and all things like on the digital front, right? So who is it that I team up with versus like taking all of the stuff? And you're really good at just being like, okay, let's team up, take a contract, divide it up. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people like come from it from like that competitive lens where they're just like, no, that's my competition, right? Versus like, wait, if we team up, we can demand higher and we all win. So I think like, what do you recommend to get into that mindset, right? So that you're also like getting more money for everyone, but also like how to look at people in a way that's collaborative.
Totally. So I think there's a couple of things. I think one, I think you have to, I think naturally that for many of us, if we're raised in a community of color, we do it naturally. I think we do. Like you look at our holidays, you look at our events, you look at, I mean, when I think about going to like a wedding, you know, in many of my community, like, are you kidding me? It's like the whole community came together. It's the two people getting married, right? But so-and-so did the flowers and someone else did the cake. And so that's how it always shows up. It's always what I think is natural and organic within our environments is this sense of sharing. So I think the first step is to step back and really know that that's where you come from. And it's going to take work, right? Like, because not everyone shares the same. Like when we were in the sandbox as kids, some of the kids took all the toys and some of them just played with 2, right? So it's going to take work. But I think the first part is to step back and really own that. And then the second part is with your business, for a lot of entrepreneurs, people are just diving in these days and they don't start with a business model. What's the model that you have for your business? What is the structure and what is the framework you have for your business? And you did the smart thing by freelancing first and playing around with it. And then you could then figure out, these are the areas that I can now own. And so from that, I can then create the model. And so what I'm always listening for a lot of folks is that people are just doing, but they're not strategizing. And in order to bring in partners, like you cannot bring someone else to the table if you don't know what you do well first. So if you don't have a clarity around what your model is, you know what, get a mentor, get a coach, do what you got to do, go to a class, watch YouTube videos, whatever, right? Like, but figure out what your model is. How do you make your money? What is it exactly that you do really, really well? And from there, then it becomes a lot easier to ask the even bigger question, which is, well, what do people right now need in this environment? What are they paying for? Where are the services offered the most that people are interested in? And then I think it becomes easier to build the partnerships. So one trick that I recommend, and I'll share this up front, is that I only got my business MWBE certified a couple of years ago, right? Like for years, I did not get the certification because I was like, I have a training company. Why would anyone want to do that?
And you keep pushing me to do that, and I need to get on that.
Right? Well, listen,
reminder.
Listen, straight up, this is one of the secrets to me for folks of color that we got to get the word out there. Okay. Now, I want to be clear. When you get certified, it comes with its own baggage along with it, right? So it's not easy. It's not like all of a sudden you check the box and like contracts are going to be dropping out the sky. They don't. But when you do certain things like you get your business certified, it actually makes it much easier to then figure out, how do I team up with a complementary company that offers? So you're talking about data. Now there's probably someone that does marketing you can team up with, someone else that does, I don't know, logistics that you can team up with. That when you see the contract, it's really easy to split it up and go in with this group of people that hopefully you trust. Right? You get your lawyers involved, you make sure the agreements are favorable to everyone. But I think that once you know your business model and you know your strengths, then there are things out there in the world that right now that exist already that are perfect for, that's what's called teaming, that are perfect for teaming up with other companies, because you couldn't do all this work on your own if you tried. You just couldn't. Like, there's no way that, you know, a one-person company, it's very rare, I think, you could handle $1 million, you know, contract.
And if you do, you're probably going to burn yourself out.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like, you wouldn't want to. You totally wouldn't want to. But the genius is you could make $1 million in your company, right? Teaming up with other companies where you're sticking to your lane, what you do really well, and you focus on what you do really well. And then you hire other elements to help you, where you stay focused on that. And then you find a way to like not spin your wheels. Like if you're not good with the financial stuff, then you don't need to be owning that part of the contract. bring someone else in where you can actually partner up on that. So I think if we go back to our roots and really just own, like, this is what we always do, right? Like, you know, something happens in the community. I mean, I remember a few years ago when we had that big storm, and you know, I'm based right outside of the city. I'm in Westchester County, and we had a big storm in our community. And primarily at that time, it was primarily Black families in the community. Like, anyone whose lights went out, people stepped in, they helped out, right? Like, you open up your doors, you look out for your neighbors. That's what we do. But now, as a business owner, just what's your model, what's your system, and then create a structure around it. And yeah, there's a lot of fun to happen when you find the right people to partner with, because you get to do what you love most.
Yeah, and that's something that I've learned the hard way. Even though, like, you taught us, it was just like, you still have to figure it out, right? Like, you still have to do it. You're gonna mess up. Like, I've taken full contracts and I was like, why did I do this? Like, I'm not an expert on the creative side. I'm not, you know, like, try to do everything. Because I think we get that in that scarcity mentality where it's like, wait, I'm gonna hoard, like, wait, I can get a contract for 5,000 and do all of it. Or instead of like hiring 2 different people and then we split it, but then you realize, wait, that's less work. I focus on the things that are better for me, and then I can take more contracts and you end up with more money, right? And then you end up fueling all the other things that you want to do that actually make you happy and like give back, right? And that took a while, even though I was like, I know Maya says I should do this, but right? But that's all of us. But I love how you were saying taking it back to your roots, right? Because that's not something I'd thought about. And you're like, you're right, this is what we do. Like, you know, I know in the Latino community, it's like for someone's sweet 16, same thing, right? We're just like, okay, someone's going to give in the cake, or yeah, especially weddings too. It's like, all right, how do we all pitch in, right? And same, like even now we're seeing that, like with COVID, that folks are just like, where do I donate? Who do I help? Who can I give food to if we don't even have like money, right? Like, I know a bunch of my friends and I were even like skill swapping, or just like, okay, like, you know, you can teach me this, I can teach you that, or I can do this for you. And I feel like that is something that's so innate in our communities, that it's something to just think about, like, how do we translate those skills, right? Like transfer right over. And yeah, I'm really excited. So definitely, like, where can well, one of the last things we wanted to kind of talk about is like brainstorm through some stuff. So what are some stuff? I know we started talking about questions.
So I will toss this one out first. So one of the things that I loved about connecting with you and first meeting you was that there are a gazillion tech tools that are out there, right? And every time you go to an entrepreneurship workshop, everyone's like, oh, how do I do this better? And oh, how do I do that better? And there's always like, you know, 5 tools at any one given point that like 600 Facebook ads are showing up. So everyone's talking about this tool. But I have to say, like, you rocked my whole world personally when you have made recommendations on tools, because I think you come at it from a different approach. And I think you're, without hesitation, you're not just looking, I know you're not just looking at the ads to make your decisions. Like, you're very thoughtful about how you're making your decisions. And I think one of the things I know that entrepreneurs need to hear more of is, if I'm going to invest in something in my business that's technology based, or that's going to support the operations in my business, what's some of the questions you ask before you purchase a tool or decide to say, oh, this is something I think I should look into? Because I don't think we're asking the right questions. That's all I'm going to say. I think we're just looking at Facebook.
Yeah. I think, oh my goodness. Yes. I think one of the biggest things is, you know, one, if you're seeing an ad for something, that just means they have a marketing budget, right? Like, so it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best tool. It just means they have money to spend to show you. And they've probably hired someone like me that's really good at targeting and was just like, hey, I'll give you $5,000. Like, go spend it on Facebook ads, right? And I'm just like, all right, cool. I try not to do that anymore, but like, yeah, I think that's one of the things that, you know, that just means they're really good at targeting you, and they have a marketing budget. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best, right? So one of the things that I definitely think before even looking at a tool, thinking like, what problems does it need to solve, right? And like how comfortable are you with it? Because, you know, sometimes you'll be like, okay, I'm gonna buy this like $30 tool a month, and you know, you're just like, oh, it has all of these things, and like, you know, it does all of this really cool stuff, and like you end up using 1% of it, right? Because you don't even have your own, and my cat's here, and because right, you might not even end up using a full tool to its full capacity because you haven't even set up a process for yourself or even know what it is that you need, because the tool is just not going to solve your problems. It's not going to just magically make everything happen, right? So So I think first is thinking like, what is it that I actually need, right? And that's, I always tell everyone to document their process. And I'm probably going to say this a million times. And I even have to do it for myself too sometimes, right? Because I think most of us have our whole process in our head, right? So like even, you know, thinking about like your course, right? Being like, okay, what is it that I'm going to be sharing? Am I going to be sharing like video? Am I going to be sharing, you know, like actual like PDFs and content, right? So it's like, okay, so I need a tool that's going to allow me to upload video, that it's going to allow me to put in content. Maybe I want to build a community around it, that we have like a closed member section. So I think it's first thinking about like, what are the things that you need? And then starting to look at the tools like, okay, this is what complements it. And then there's also the give and take, right? So I always look at it. I am lucky that I have some like technical knowledge and some programming knowledge. So I'm just like, okay, like I could spend less money, have to do a little bit of coding, right? To use a tool that costs less. And usually like the more manual stuff you have to do, the more it's going to cost, right? If there's any like, and usually, you know, you think about it and you're like, okay, well, if it's going to save me time, I don't want to learn all these technical stuff. It's going to save me time. If there's a free version of it, try the free version. And I would say even like, don't try the free version until you know how you're going to use it. So that way you're just like, hey, okay, like I'm ready, you know, maybe I think one of the tools that I told you was Podia, and this is something I didn't do and I should have, was being like, okay, I should have at least 3 things ready to go, try it out, see if it works, if I like it during that free trial, right? And then it's like, okay, maybe I don't. And that's the other thing with software. You could be a whole Karen and you could just email people and be like, hey, I tried the free tool, you know, or I didn't get a chance to try this free tool. Can I get an extension, right? Like, yeah, I've done this all the time. I was the customer service people for these. Like, you can do that, right? Like, they want you to buy their tool because that's long-term revenue for them, right? Oh. So you can just be like, hey, can I use this? Or maybe you didn't like it, right? That you could just be like, okay, this wasn't a fit. So I think definitely testing it out and even having that ROI model, or you're just like, okay, if I'm going to pay, like for Calendly, for example, right? Calendly costs $15 a month. I do my personal bookings on there. I do like podcast bookings and I do coaching bookings on there, right? And like consultations where they can pay immediately right there. So I'm just like, okay, if I get one at like, I think I have it right now at $59 for like a brainstorm session. I'm like $59, that pays the $15 that I'm supposed to, you know, that I pay that month. So I just exceeded, like I just got revenue from that. So it like justifies the cost, right? So I think that's one thing to definitely think about. And then the other thing to definitely think about is, you know, how easy is it to use? Like how comfortable do you want to be with it? And you could always switch. But even if you were to switch a tool later, like if you have your process built out, like this is the steps that I need to onboard, these are the things that I need from a client, then it makes it really easy in the future if you're just like, you know what, I hate this tool, let me move to another one, right? You already have your process built out so that you could easily migrate over. And one tool.
Can I just say really quickly, that's huge what you're talking about with your process, by the way. And I hope people catch that because I think that one alone is worth the whole price of admission for this right now. But keep going.
But even then, it's really, oh my God, it's just crazy like how people don't do that. One tool that I really like, you can even just do like a Google sheet and make a to-do list, right? Or like a bulleted list. And you're like, step 1, step 2. Like even for this, you know, I have my process where I'm just like, send out an email, like ask for headshots, set up a link for the multi-stream, like put out my Instagram. And it seems like, you know, oh, duh, these are things that you do, but it's like, yes, but as I'm growing, like I want other people to know like, hey, this is my process, right? So right now I have Nancy that joined our team and she's like helping me with this. So now I'm just like, okay, here's the process that I do so we can make it easier. And I think that's one of the things, the tools will eventually just automate the super day-to-day things. And that's what you want to look for in software. It's like, what can cut down a 10-step process to a 5-step process, right? So if it cuts it down, that saves me half as much time that it is worth like paying $10 a month, $20 a month, right? So I think that's something to think about. And also knowing that like, you know, if worst case scenario, the whole company goes bankrupt, because these are also companies, right? Software tools. So it's like, if that company goes away, you still have your process that you can move over somewhere else. But one of the tools I really love is Product Hunt. And it's basically like a Facebook-ish, I don't even know how, it's a database for apps. So like, you can just go in there and start looking at it, reading the reviews, and companies will launch a product there, and they'll be like, hey, like, our new app is there, like, take a look at it. So I think that's one of the tools where you can start looking. And, you know, if you see somebody using a really cool tool, this is just like a community builder aspect, right? Ask them, be like, hey, do you have a referral link? Because a lot of people have, like, a lot of these platforms have referral links. And, you know, if you see someone that's using it and you're like, wait, I want to use that, just go ask them, because usually you get a free trial, like maybe you get a longer period, maybe you get some type of credit, and you just made them like a couple bucks too, right? So I think that's another thing, like asking people. I always ask people when I see something that they're using, I'm like, hey, do you have a referral code? And if they're like, no, and I'm like, go make one now, right? Like,
no. Jot that. You got to jot that one down for your processes. Like, seriously, we all need to be using that as a part of our processes, instead of just randomly just buying stuff of like, you're 1,000. That's genius, seriously.
Because it's what Uber does. It's what all these companies do, right? So I think if you're hearing from it, and even if you hear about it from your favorite bloggers and stuff, like, go back to their blog posts and click on their link, because that's one way to support them. It's passive income. They're helping the business bring sales, but also like you're giving back a little bit, and you usually get like some type of bonus with these type of referrals.
Right.
I think that, but also being a little skeptical too, if that's the only reason people are pushing it out, right?
Right. Totally.
So it's like a double edge, but I think that's something to definitely consider when you're looking at different tools. And obviously, like, it's not going to be the same fit. I even will actually Google, like, you know, for example, a CRM tool. I'm testing 3 out right now, like, simultaneously. And
one is not enough.
I'm very, very, I mean, I used to work in software, so I'm very picky about my software, right? Like, so, because I'm like, okay, what's the experience like? And sometimes, like, pretty experience won't necessarily mean it's that much better, right?
Sure.
Like WordPress, that's a perfect example. Everyone hates it, and it's like, let me do Squarespace, but WordPress has so much more capacity. There's just a huge learning curve, right? But it, like, long term, it's like,
it's much better.
More. Yeah, it's much better. But I think that's something to think about. It's just like, okay, what's the learning curve? But also just thinking about how it plays into overall picture of everything, and, you know, the usability of it. But yeah, I mean, I could talk software forever.
Are you kidding me? For most people, we're spinning our wheels and we're taking too much time to do things. And I think the thing that you're going to make me go back and revisit this back again is like your focus on the process and documenting the process. Like, you're going to make me go back now and rewrite some things over.
Yeah. Oh my God. Even then,
that's everything. That's the foundation.
Writing your process. I like Notion.so. And I have a credit referral if anyone wants it. But the other
drop that in the links later on. Yes,
I will. Right. And then the other thing, like, you could use Evernote. You could literally use like Word. You can use Google Sheets. It's really just writing it down and like having an actual process. And then I think even being scrappy, and this is something that I tend to do. I'm like, no, it has to be perfect. I have to write it exactly. And I'm like, you know what? Like, jot it down, go back, edit. And I think that's really what it is. It's just like start and then keep fixing it, keep perfecting it, right? And that's with everything, right? Whether it's software, whether it's your process, just absolutely everything. And one of the reasons that I loved working with you, because you're just like, just start. And I'm like, and I literally was like, okay, I want to continue working with Maya because she's going to give me the kick in the butt that I need.
Right.
But yeah, well, where can people find you, what you're doing, and sign up for your course?
Would love it. Would absolutely love it. So without hesitation, you can find me on Instagram at mharidat, which is also my same handle for Twitter. And then we're in terms of being able to sign up for the course. This is the fun deal. Go to my website, which is actually really easy, MallaHaridat.com. It's just my name.com. And get on my newsletter. Yeah, totally. Get on my newsletter, because I'm going to do some special bonuses for folks that are on my newsletter right now to be able to get them on board even quicker and start earning more in a way that feels natural and authentic to them. And just because it goes back again to this thing, like, this is not about just making more money. Like, it is, but it's deeper than that. It's about doing it in a way where you recognize the business, where you feel really empowered by what it is. Like, you're excited about it because it reflects the values you have, right? Like it reflects who you are as a person, the type of people you want to work with. And there's some work to get there, right? Like we got to do some work, and that's fine, but we'll do it together as a group and we'll figure it out. And then, I mean, then you start turning around and you start hearing the successes like I hear with you, where you're like, you know what, Maya, I just negotiated something that like blows the rest of the other ones.
Yeah, and I still text you and I'm like, guess what?
Listen, this is my biggest thing. I mean, like, this is my heart of heart of why this course is so critical to me. If the folks like us and the folks who are listening right now on this live, if we got access to real capital, right? If we got access to real wealth, we could rewrite the rules of how business could be done. But right now, we're too much on the sidelines. We're not able to hire people, right? People pay attention to people who can hire people and a whole bunch of other things that go on. And I get it.
When they do want to give us capital, it's at absurd like rates that are exploitative.
Exactly. And I get it's complicated, right? I get that there's all types of systemic issues that go on. Trust me, I get it. But I think that if we start owning that value piece for ourselves and show up just on that part alone, I think we can make some serious dents into this conversation, and in a way where folks have to take us seriously and in a different way than they do right now. And that's what I'm here for. That's to me why this course needs to be done, because I need to see us winning. That's what it is.
Yes, I'm so here for this, and I know we're going to do this, and we're going to look back and be like, remember when we talked about this?
I know.
We've already had some of those moments, so I'm happy.
Totally.
Well, Maya, thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm really happy because you're one of like you're one of the people that like have always believed in me and pushed me. So this is like a very full circle moment for me.
It totally is. I'm excited. I'm here for it. And let's, you know what? Let's duplicate this. Let's really light a fire to this conversation. I had a mentor years ago who told me that when you have a candle and someone else lights a fire from your candle, it doesn't take away your flame. And so I firmly believe that we both have our candles up right now, and the folks who are watching, we're going to keep lighting the candles moving on. That's where the magic's going to happen. I totally believe that.
Oh man, that I love that. You really
right?
you don't. You're just building a bigger fire.
Bingo.
Yes.
Bingo.
I love that. And I think more than ever we need that in every way possible.
Amen on that one.
Well, thank you, Maya.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye. And